Welcome to the Befores. I'm Bongeni Mutwa. The country is still reeling from news yesterday that the dreaded second wave of high COVID-19 infections has arrived. The big question now is, what should be done? The COVID-19 second wave comes on the back of a strong economic rebound in the third quarter. GDP grew by 13.5% from a historic 51% decline in the second quarter due to the hard lockdown to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Government is yet to decide whether or not to impose new restrictions on the country. For its part, business says it's against the reintroduction of a hard national lockdown. Instead, it is calling for targeted interventions in various hotspots around the country.
We don't think a lockdown, moving from lockdown level 1 to higher levels of lockdown, the economy cannot bear that. Even though we've had a growth in GDP in the last period, but we're still predicting about an 8% drop in GDP for the year.
With unemployment currently sitting at a high level of 43%, when discouraged work seekers are included, it seems that South Africa can indeed ill afford another shutdown of the economy, even if it is to fight the effects of a second wave of COVID-19 infections. Bongeni Mutwa, SABC News, Johannesburg. For a perspective of organized labor, I'm joined by COSATU Spokesperson Sizwe Pamla. Good afternoon, Sizwe.
Afternoon to you and the view.
Well, first, quickly, your reaction to the news that we are now in the second wave of COVID-19. How has that hit you as COSATU?
Well, these are depressing news, especially when you look at that many of our members in the health sector are struggling to keep pace with the developments. We've already lost more than 200 members. The health facilities are struggling to really accommodate many of these people who are being hospitalized. And we have been making this call again and again to South Africans to say we don't want to see another hard lockdown. The health institutions that we have, they are vulnerable. They are ill-equipped. We still stuck with PPEs, and many of these workers are exhausted, having had to deal with COVID-19, but also a number of diseases that are overwhelming the system. So we can only add our voice to say, look, something needs to be done, but it means South Africans themselves will have to take responsibility. We don't think government can do anything more than really have these targeted interventions in the identified hotspots, but we don't think as a country we can afford another hard lockdown.
Now, it's always been known that mass gatherings are a no-no during this time of COVID. Yet, we've seen you and your affiliate Nehao especially embarking on mass protests where we saw big numbers of workers coming out in different parts of the country. Do you accept responsibility for maybe having contributed to where we find ourselves now in the midst of a second wave of infections?
No, I think you are trying to overstate this case. What you are saying is totally untrue. For example, the last picket that we had at the union buildings, we sent members of the Central Executive Committee and some few shop stewards. And of course, under alert level 1, we are allowed to gather as long as you constrain your numbers and as long as you adhere to social distancing and you wear masks. So if you look at the fact that we have a public service that is very aggrieved, that has been itching for a strike, and we have resisted to allow them to go on strikes. If you look at, for example, the October 7th strike of COSATU, we actually had more convoys of cars rather than people taking to the streets. We decentralized all of our activities as a way of ensuring that we do not contribute. So I just find it totally unacceptable that you look at all of the efforts that we have done to avoid a strike, to avoid mass gatherings, and then you read into that for some reason we have contributed to the second waves. I reject that.
Well, of course, during your strike on October 7, we saw thousands of workers flooding the streets in big sectors around the country. But of course, we're not going to argue about that.
Workers around the country in a decentralized fashion. You didn't see mass gatherings. We didn't have provincial marches. We had small towns. So when you talk about thousands, I agree with you, there were thousands, but all across cities and small towns, all across the country. That was deliberate. We didn't have marches, provincial marches. For example, we didn't march in Pretoria, but we marched all across Joburg. So the point we're making here is that we have been doing everything possible as an organization under extreme circumstances when workers are losing their jobs. You yourselves at SABC, you are facing retrenchments. These are the circumstances that workers are facing on a daily basis. It doesn't mean that because we have a pandemic, then people's rights are suspended. But everything that we have been doing to support those struggles, to wage those struggles, we have been doing it under extreme consideration of the alert level 1 regulations that currently apply.
Well, coming to the situation as it stands now, business in South Africa says another hard lockdown is a no-no. For you as COSATU, what do you say?
No, we don't think that as an economy we can afford another hard lockdown. Already we have lost more than 2 million jobs. If then you add another hard lockdown, it will mean that even the festive boost that we are hoping for, to at least absorb some of the people on a temporary basis, even that will not happen. So look, but lives come first. There has to be some serious interventions coming from government. The private sector itself, they've really been relaxed. You go into malls, you go into many of the facilities. People have forgotten that COVID-19 still exists. Sanitizers are no longer supplied. They don't force people to wear masks. We still believe that government can do much more than they are currently doing to enforce all of these regulations at a workplace level, but also around our communities. There is something that can still be done, but falling short of the hard lockdown, we don't think as an economy and as a country we can afford another hard lockdown.
Well, Sizwe, it's always a pleasure having you on. Thank you very much. That's why we have to leave it for now. Up next, The Alternative Investor with Nastasia Arense. Stay with us.